time team solutions is actually about bringing together the most efficient structuring of both people's time and also the way they work together in teams. One of the things that we believe within Time Team Solutions is that there are massive opportunities for organisations over the next few years if they can start to address those issues. And one of the tricks for us is when people get back into growth, they don't necessarily take all that baggage with them. And from a cost point of view, if they can grow, let's say, by 100%, they don't just automatically assume they have to increase their labour bill by 100%. If we look over a period of a year, which is a fairly typical planning period, it's also the financial year, by definition 12 months, pay years, there's a lot of things that are based on a 12-month cycle within a business, and that basically explains how you would actually break it down and work out how many hours people had available to work over a year as opposed to over a week or over a month. What we're saying is we plan people's time on a flat line, but the reality is that in most organisations, you don't have a flat line in terms of when you actually want people's time and when you need particular skills through the year. And what we're saying is that here, traditionally, you call that overtime, because what you're saying is you need more hours than you've actually got within people's basic time available to you. So what do? You work overtime or you bring agency people in. The thing that we find more significant, because actually all the stats show that people are pretty productive when they're working overtime, in the main, because that's when people are busy, that's when you need them. The key thing is what we call undertime, which is there. And what you're in effect doing is you're probably creating work, or people will always say they are busy. But whether you can actually justify those people being in when you're in a trough is problematical. But of course people will always say they're busy, but you've potentially got that as a problem when you're planning people on a flat line, it's 40 hours a week. We had a project there where people talked, within distribution, they talked about dayality. They said on different days they had different requirements for people's time, and it built up and peaked on a Thursday, particularly after Sunday opening had started, and they needed to get product out into the stores. So you can look at it actually on any particular time period you want. So what I'm suggesting is that most organisations, and this is the concept really that you might find interesting and just have a think about within your business, are you actually matching the real demand that you've got, which will vary? It will vary. It will never ever be flat all through, say, a full year. Are you actually matching people's time to that? We talked about the concept of there are times when you're very busy, perhaps say in January, tax returns, yeah? So it's all hands to the pump then, and then you allow people to take time off in periods when you don't require people. Yeah. So what you're doing is balancing their hours, aren't you, over the year, yeah? Which is in essence what this is about. I don't know if anybody's got much experience of the bakery industry, but traditionally they've had practices whereby if people are not busy, they in effect they send themselves home and clock off and don't get any more pay, and then come back in when they're needed. So through a traditional approach really within that particular industry, they've actually got themselves into a position where they are very flexible because people are self-regulating. It's when they're actually required. So what we do is we talk about, within this model, we talk about, if you look at a 12-month period, you can work out the number of hours that people are required to work over the full year, and then you can look at putting them on a flexible roster or an informal roster. But we also use the concept of what we call uncommitted reserve hours, where it's a bit like holding a bit of money back in the bank, and then you can draw down on that if you've got particular needs that you haven't necessarily planned and weren't aware of, or particular things like productivity, quality default within a team, then potentially people will have to rectify those problems without getting any extra money. In turn, then helps people hopefully keep the jobs. There's a lot of stats that show that when you've got people working overtime, they are at their most productive, because what you're doing is you're using overtime perhaps as a means of obviously trying to deal with a busy period, yeah? The idea of trying to match the time to the year is you ensure that at any given time, the people who are in work are busy. So you are developing the same level of productivity right throughout the year by tailoring the number of people, and that can be done by a function of the number of people come in or the number of hours that they work. However, there is also a view that overtime and this is where, you know, sometimes it's about balance. There is a view that overtime, if you're paying premium rate for it, is actually an incentive for people to work slow. Because they know that if they get through, say, their basic hours of 40, and there is then still a need to do some work, then they know they'll get called in on overtime. Yeah? Because what we're saying is, look, from the other end of the telescope, we want people to actually complete all the work within a defined normal period of time with certain flexibility around it. And we want to make sure that people feel they've got a sufficient reward not to feel they need to be trying to fabricate overtime. For example, a project that I did in Melton Mowbray, they had a culture whereby the operators would never tell maintenance that they thought they might be having a problem with the machine because there was a funny noise or there was problems starting to develop, because they knew that eventually the machines would have to stop, maintenance would then come in, they would then end up being told, well, we're going to have to finish production this week, therefore you're going to have to come in on overtime. And in fact, maybe maintenance will have to come in to make sure we actually turned that around and introduced a new way of working whereby the operatives, it was in their interest to let maintenance know if they thought they were going to have a problem so they could deal with them before it became a major problem and they went offline. Because the way we structured it all, it was a disincentive for them to let it break down. And the other thing we also did was we actually put all the maintenance at the start of the week rather than at the end of the week. So for the first 24 hours, they actually spent the time making sure that the machinery was then going to be reliable for the rest of the week. And we then flexed the amount of production dependent on the need through the year at the end of the week rather than trying to cram it in at the start and then panic over not getting your maintenance done. A lot of people would suggest that the use of overtime is often a way of management covering up their mistakes. Because if they screw up, but they still need to get the production, not a problem, well, we'll just throw some overtime at it and people will come in and do it because it's on premium. So that's the first point. The second point is that in terms of taking these concepts of time and team, you can actually develop them a long way. And typically they will develop, and in different teams and in different organisations at different rates. And we start off by getting the team to control the time, and over a period, they then start picking up other aspects of the job. But basically, what we're starting to do is actually get people to control their own work.